I'm Miranda, 32, a third-generation wine expert who poured my heart into our family vineyard for 10 years. My innovative distribution strategies transformed our small operation into a thriving business. Then my parents chose my younger brother Scott to lead everything I built, despite his minimal experience. I walked away with my dignity intact, only to watch them lose their $6 million distributor without me. Before I tell you how my family's decision cost them everything, drop a comment letting me know if you've ever been overlooked for something you deserved, and subscribe to hear more stories about family business drama. Russell Family Vineyards wasn't just a business to me. It was my heritage, my childhood, and what I thought would be my future. My grandparents, Walter and Elaine Russell, purchased the 30-acre property in Napa Valley back in 1967 when the region was just beginning to gain recognition. They started with just 5 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon grapes and a dream. My grandfather often told me stories of those early days, working from sunrise to sunset, weathering poor harvests and financial uncertainty, but never losing faith in what they were building. I was practically raised among the vines. While other kids spent weekends at the mall, I helped my grandfather check sugar levels during harvest season and learned to identify the subtle differences between grape varieties by taste and appearance. My earliest memory is sitting on my grandfather's shoulders at age 4, reaching up to touch the hanging clusters of purple fruit. "These vines are alive," he told me. "They're like family. You take care of them, and they'll take care of you." By 12, I was helping in the tasting room on weekends, soaking up knowledge about wine varieties and production methods. When tourists asked questions, I'd proudly share facts about fermentation processes and oak aging that made adults chuckle at my precocious expertise. But my grandfather never laughed. He nodded with approval, seeing my genuine passion. My parents, Henry and Diana Russell, worked alongside my grandparents to grow the business. My father expanded the vineyard to 50 acres and built a modern production facility in the 90s. My mother managed the books and customer relations, establishing a loyal clientele. They were partners in every sense, though my father always had the final say on major decisions, a dynamic I observed but didn't fully understand until much later. When it came time for college, there was never any question about my path. I enrolled at UC Davis, one of the country's top viticulture programs, while simultaneously taking business courses. Those 4 years were intense, studying soil chemistry and vine diseases by day, analyzing financial statements and marketing strategies by night. I graduated near the top of my class with multiple job offers from prestigious wineries across California and even abroad. My classmate Natalie couldn't believe I turned down a position at Chateau Margaux in France. "That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," she said over coffee after graduation. "Are you sure you want to go back to the family business? You'll always be the boss's daughter there, not your own person." Her words gave me pause, but my commitment to Russell Family Vineyards ran deeper than career ambitions. "My grandfather's getting older," I explained, "and I have ideas that could really take our vineyard to the next level. This is what I've been working toward my whole life." When I returned home with my degree, I threw myself into modernizing our operations. I introduced sustainable farming practices that reduced our water usage by 30% while improving grape quality. I updated our fermentation protocols based on the latest research, resulting in more consistent flavor profiles across vintages. Within 2 years, our Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve won gold at the San Francisco International Wine Competition, putting Russell Family Vineyards on the map among serious wine enthusiasts. My grandfather Walter became my greatest champion. Though well into his 70s, he accompanied me through the vineyards almost daily, his knowledge of the land complementing my scientific approach. "You have both the heart and the head for this business," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from the highest point on our property. "That's rare, Miranda. Don't let anyone tell you differently." My brother Scott took a different path. 3 years younger than me, he inherited our mother's musical talent and spent his 20s pursuing a career as a guitarist in San Francisco. His band had moderate success playing local venues, but never quite broke through. I supported his dreams, attending his shows whenever possible, while he visited the vineyard mainly for holidays and family celebrations. That changed when our father turned 65 and began talking about retirement and succession planning. Suddenly, Scott developed an interest in the family business. "I'm thinking about coming back home," he announced during Thanksgiving dinner 4 years ago. "I could learn the ropes, maybe help with marketing or something." My father's face lit up in a way I rarely saw when discussing my accomplishments. "That's wonderful news, son. We could certainly use your creative energy around here." My mother squeezed Scott's hand. The vineyard was always meant to stay in the family. I welcomed Scott's interest, despite the slight sting of our parents' enthusiasm. "I can show you everything I've learned," I offered. "There's so much opportunity to grow the business." Scott started the following month, shadowing me through various aspects of operations. He was charming and quick-witted, but struggled with the technical details and meticulous nature of winemaking. "How do you keep all these numbers and processes straight?" he asked after a particularly challenging day monitoring fermentation tanks. "Practice," I assured him. "And passion. You'll get there." What Scott lacked in expertise, he made up for in enthusiasm. My father assigned him projects that played to his strengths: redesigning our tasting room, creating promotional materials, initiating our social media presence. I focused on production, quality control, and most importantly, distribution, the lifeblood of any winery. Then, just as Scott was finding his place, our grandfather passed away peacefully in his sleep. His funeral brought together winemakers from across the valley, all sharing stories about Walter Russell's generosity and wisdom. As we scattered his ashes over the original 5 acres he'd planted, I made a silent promise to honor his legacy by taking Russell family vineyards to greater heights. What I didn't realize was that my grandfather's passing would trigger a series of decisions that would test my dedication to that promise in ways I never imagined. In the years following my return to Russell family vineyards, I methodically built our business into something my grandfather would have been proud to see. When I started, we were producing about 5,000 cases annually, selling primarily through our tasting room and a handful of local restaurants. By my 10th year, we tripled production to 15,000 cases and dramatically expanded our distribution channels. One of my first major projects was securing organic certification for our vineyard. The 3-year transition process wasn't easy. It meant temporarily lower yields and higher labor costs as we eliminated conventional pesticides and fertilizers. My father balked at the investment initially. "Organic is just a marketing buzzword," he argued during a tense meeting. "People care about taste, not whether we sprayed." "It's more than marketing," I countered, sliding a market analysis across his desk. "Premium organic wines command 30% higher prices, and that segment is growing twice as fast as conventional. Plus, it's better for our land long-term." Eventually, he relented, and the certification proved worthwhile. Our organic Russell Family Reserve Cabernet, a blend I developed through countless experimental batches, won double gold at the California State Fair and received 94 points from Wine Enthusiast. Those accolades opened doors to high-end restaurants and specialty retailers previously beyond our reach. I also established our vineyard tour program, converting an old storage barn into an education center where visitors could learn about viticulture before sampling our wines. This initiative increased our direct-to-consumer sales by 40% in the first year alone, with many tourists becoming wine club members who received quarterly shipments. "You've got a real talent for this business side," my mother remarked after reviewing the quarterly financials. "Your father and grandfather were excellent winemakers, but neither had your head for growth strategies." Her praise meant the world to me, but my most significant achievement came through relentless relationship building. For 3 years, I pursued Platinum Distributors, one of the largest wine distribution companies on the West Coast. Their portfolio included some of the most prestigious labels, and landing a contract with them would transform our business overnight. Jennifer Thompson was my contact at Platinum, a no-nonsense industry veteran who'd seen every sales pitch imaginable. My first cold call ended with a polite but firm dismissal. "We're not taking on new labels at this time," she stated, "especially from smaller family operations." Rather than give up, I researched Platinum's portfolio and identified a gap they had in premium organic Napa Cabernets. I sent Jennifer a sample of our award-winning reserve with a handwritten note highlighting this opportunity. 2 weeks later, she called back. "I'm intrigued," she admitted, "but skeptical about your production capacity and consistency." That began a 6-month courtship process. I invited Jennifer to tour our facilities, demonstrating our quality control measures and production capabilities. I arranged private tastings with vertical samples of our vintages, proving our consistency across years. I developed comprehensive marketing materials showcasing our unique story and organic certification. The breakthrough came during a dinner in San Francisco where Jennifer introduced me to Platinum's purchasing director. "Miranda knows her product inside and out," she told him. "And she understands the market better than vintners twice her age." 3 weeks later, we signed a distribution agreement worth $6 million annually, representing 35% of our total revenue. The contract transformed Russell Family Vineyards from a respectable local operation to a regional powerhouse with placement in fine dining establishments and specialty shops across California, Oregon, and Washington. Meanwhile, Scott had settled into his role at the vineyard with mixed results. His redesign of our tasting room was visually stunning, but went 20% over budget. His social media campaign increased our visitor traffic, but required constant oversight to maintain professional messaging. He started numerous initiatives, a music series, a wine club revamp, a charity partnership, but frequently abandoned them midway when new ideas captured his attention. Despite these challenges, I patiently mentored him, explaining the nuances of wine business operations and introducing him to industry contacts. Distribution relationships are everything, I emphasized while preparing for a Platinum distributor's quarterly review. Jennifer expects detailed sales reports, production forecasts, and promotional plans. She's investing in our reliability as much as our wine quality. Scott nodded along, but I could tell the methodical nature of these partnerships didn't excite him the way creative projects did. "Couldn't we just hire someone to handle all these reports and meetings?" he suggested. "These relationships are too important to delegate," I explained. "Jennifer values personal connections. She needs to know the family stands behind the business." One evening, after working late on production schedules, I overheard my father in his office, speaking with our family financial advisor. Their voices carried through the partially open door as I passed by. "Scott's really coming into his own here," my father was saying. "I think he's ready to take on more responsibility." "What about Miranda?" the advisor asked. "She's been instrumental to your recent growth." There was a pause before my father responded. "Miranda's excellent at what she does, and she'll always have a place here. But Scott represents the future of the Russell name. It's traditionally the son who takes over the family business." I froze in the hallway, a spreadsheet clutched in my hands, as my father continued. "Besides, Miranda's so good at the technical aspects. The production, the quality control. Scott has the charisma, the vision for where we could go next. They complement each other." I quietly stepped away, my mind reeling. In my father's eyes, my decade of expertise, the millions in revenue I'd generated, the relationships I'd built, all of that amounted to being good at the technical aspects. Meanwhile, Scott's charisma apparently qualified him for leadership. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying my father's words and wondering if I'd misunderstood my place in the family business all along. 2 weeks after overhearing my father's conversation, he called a family meeting in the vineyard's conference room. The space held years of memories, strategy sessions with my grandfather, celebrations of record harvests, and late nights poring over expansion plans. Now, it would become the setting for a moment that would alter the course of my life. My father sat at the head of the mahogany table, my mother to his right, with an uncharacteristic tension in her usually warm expression. Scott arrived last, sliding into the chair across from me with a coffee mug bearing our vineyard logo. "Thank you all for making time for this," my father began, straightening a stack of papers before him. "As you know, I've been considering the future leadership structure of Russell Family Vineyards. After careful thought, I've made a decision that I believe is best for our business moving forward." He paused, making deliberate eye contact with each of us. Scott will be taking over as head of operations, effective next month. He'll oversee all departments and represent the vineyard publicly as we enter this next chapter. The words hung in the air like a dense fog. Scott's expression shifted from surprise to a pleased smile, while my mother nodded supportively. I remained perfectly still, my face a practiced mask of composure despite the internal earthquake shaking my foundation. "Dad," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Could you explain the reasoning behind this decision? I've been managing operations for nearly a decade, established our major distribution channels, and developed our award-winning reserves." My father leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. "Scott needs this opportunity to grow into leadership. He brings fresh perspective and energy to the role. The Russell name has always been carried forward by the son. That's our tradition." "But tradition doesn't override experience," I countered. "Scott has been with the vineyard for less than 4 years, and with all due respect," I glanced at my brother, "he hasn't completed a single harvest season independently." "Miranda," my mother interjected softly, "your father has considered all aspects of this decision. Your expertise in production is invaluable, and you'll continue overseeing that area." "Exactly," my father nodded. "You'll maintain your current responsibilities while reporting to Scott. Your role is crucial. We're simply restructuring the leadership." "Restructuring," I repeated, the corporate euphemism stinging. "By placing someone with a fraction of my experience above me because he's your son, not your daughter." My father's jaw tightened. "That's unfair, Miranda. This isn't about gender, it's about complementary strengths. Scott has natural leadership qualities and vision. Women don't traditionally lead in this industry anyway. It's physically demanding and requires a certain presence with distributors and buyers." The antiquated sentiment shocked me into silence. I'd spent years building relationships with those very distributors, negotiating contracts that transformed our business, all while managing the physical demands of production. Scott cleared his throat. "Miranda, I know you've done amazing work here. Nothing will really change day to day. We'll still make decisions together, and I'll rely on your expertise." His patronizing tone only deepened my anger. "Will we make decisions together? Because that's not how a reporting structure works, Scott. You'll have final say over strategies I developed, relationships I built, processes I implemented." "You're overreacting," my father cut in. "This is a natural evolution for any family business. Scott deserves a chance to lead. And I deserved consideration based on merit and results, not birth order," I replied, standing up. "I need some time to process this. Excuse me." Later that evening, my mother found me in the vineyard, walking the rows I knew by heart. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land my grandfather had lovingly tended. "I wish you could see this from your father's perspective," she said, falling into step beside me. "He believes he's doing what's best for everyone. The vineyard will eventually pass to both you and Scott. This is just about operational structure." "Mom, be honest with me. If our positions were reversed, if I were the son with 4 years' experience and Scott were the daughter with 10 years of proven success, would Dad still be making the same decision?" She hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already knew. "We need you to support your brother," she finally said. "Be a team player. The family needs unity right now." "Unity doesn't require sacrificing my self-respect," I replied quietly. That night, alone in my cottage on the vineyard property, I sat on my porch watching the stars emerge over the vines. I thought about my grandfather's hands, weathered from decades of tending this land, and how gently they had guided mine when teaching me to prune vines as a child. I remembered his pride when I graduated from UC Davis and his words, "You have both the heart and the head for this business." I thought about the Platinum Distributor's contract sitting in my desk drawer, the result of countless meetings, phone calls, and personal guarantees I had made to Jennifer Thompson. I considered the production improvements I'd implemented, the sustainable farming practices I'd fought for, the marketing strategies I'd developed. Most painfully, I confronted the glass ceiling I'd hit in my own family's business. My father's words echoed, "Women don't traditionally lead in this industry." After everything I'd accomplished, I was still seen as a supporting character in the Russell family story. Valuable, but ultimately subordinate to my brother simply because of our respective chromosomes. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't stay to be sidelined in a business I had helped build. I wouldn't report to my less experienced brother while pretending the arrangement was fair or logical. And I wouldn't compromise my professional worth to maintain a false family harmony. It was time to leave Russell Family Vineyards. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with my father in his office, the same space where he'd just decided my professional fate without my input. Sunlight streamed through the window behind his desk, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air as I closed the door behind me. "I've come to a decision," I stated, remaining standing despite his gesture toward the chair opposite his desk. "I'm resigning from Russell Family Vineyards, effective 2 weeks from today." My father's expression shifted from surprise to dismissal in seconds. "Don't be dramatic, Miranda. You're upset about the restructuring, which is understandable. Take some time to cool off and we'll discuss your concerns." "This isn't an emotional reaction," I replied evenly. "It's a professional decision based on career development. The new structure doesn't allow for my growth or utilize my expertise appropriately." He leaned back in his leather chair, the same one my grandfather had used, and sighed. "You're overreacting. Where would you even go? This vineyard is your legacy." "A legacy that apparently doesn't include leadership for me," I countered. "I have options, Dad. I've turned down offers over the years to stay here, believing I was building something for my future. Now I see that future doesn't exist as I envisioned it." "You'll change your mind," he said with unearned confidence. "Once you've thought this through logically, you'll see this is where you belong." His dismissive tone only reinforced my decision. "My mind is made up. I'll document all current projects and train Scott on the distribution relationships during my notice period." As I turned to leave, he called after me, "This vineyard has been in our family for 3 generations, Miranda. Are you really willing to walk away from that?" I paused at the door. "I'm not walking away from my heritage, Dad. I'm walking toward my self-respect." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of documentation and transition meetings. I created detailed manuals for every aspect of my role: production schedules, quality control protocols, distributor requirements, promotional calendars. I conducted methodical handoffs with staff who looked increasingly concerned as the reality of my departure set in. Cleaning out my office was harder than I'd anticipated. Each item held a memory. The soil composition maps I'd created with my grandfather, photos from award ceremonies, the pen I'd used to sign the Platinum Distributor's contract. I found a dried grape cluster from my first harvest as production manager, preserved in a small frame with the date. These weren't just mementos, they were artifacts of a decade of passionate work. The vineyard workers organized a small goodbye gathering at the end of my final day. Manuel, our vineyard manager who had worked alongside my grandfather for 20 years, presented me with a hand-carved grape cluster. "Your grandfather would be proud of the person you've become," he said quietly, "and disappointed in how things ended. You'll always be a part of this land, Ms. Miranda, no matter where you go." His words brought the first tears I'd allowed myself since making my decision. These people, the ones who actually worked the land and created our wines, they understood my contributions in ways my own family couldn't seem to grasp. Scott found me later as I was loading the last box into my car. He shuffled awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "You don't have to leave, you know," he said. "We can make this work. I'll consult you on everything important." I closed my trunk and turned to face him. "That's not how leadership works, Scott. You can't have someone with more experience consulting while reporting to you. It creates confusion and undermines authority, yours and mine. So you're just giving up? That doesn't sound like you." "I'm not giving up," I corrected him. "I'm choosing a different path where my expertise will be valued appropriately." "There's a difference." "What about Platinum? Jennifer Thompson barely knows me." "A valid concern, given the importance of that relationship. I've scheduled a video call for you two tomorrow. All the contract details are in the transition documents." Just remember that Jennifer values consistency and transparency above all. Never promise what you can't deliver and always communicate changes well in advance. Before leaving, I made one last call to Jennifer at Platinum Distributors. Professional courtesy demanded I inform our largest partner about the leadership change personally rather than letting her discover it through an impersonal email or, worse, through industry gossip. You're leaving? Jennifer's surprise was evident even over the phone. Miranda, you're the reason we partnered with Russell in the first place. I appreciate that, Jennifer. I've ensured all your account information is properly transitioned. Scott will be your new primary contact. A pause. Your brother? The one who missed our last quarterly review. He's aware of the importance of your partnership, I assured her, sidestepping her implied concern. This is unexpected, she said carefully. Will you be joining another vineyard? I'm exploring options, I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the uncertainty churning inside me. Well, keep me posted on where you land. People with your expertise are rare in this industry. Her words provided a small comfort as I drove away from Russell Family Vineyards for the last time, watching the rows of carefully tended vines recede in my rearview mirror. The following weeks were disorienting. I rented a small apartment in San Francisco, temporary housing while I figured out my next steps. After 10 years of purpose-driven work connected to my family heritage, I found myself adrift, questioning my identity outside the vineyard. The job interviews came quickly once word spread of my availability. My reputation in the industry opened doors at several prestigious wineries. Each offer was flattering but felt somehow hollow. I would be implementing someone else's vision rather than building something meaningful. You seem hesitant, observed Thomas Harrington, owner of Harrington Estates, after extending a generous offer for a production director position. May I ask what's holding you back? I considered his question carefully. After running comprehensive operations at Russell, I'm looking for a role where I can apply my full range of skills, not just production, but business development and strategic growth. He nodded thoughtfully. That's fair. Though I should mention, most established wineries already have those strategic roles filled by family members or long-term executives. His comment crystallized my dilemma. In this industry dominated by family businesses and established hierarchies, I might face the same ceiling I'd encountered at home. The breakthrough came unexpectedly over coffee with an old UC Davis classmate, Alicia Mendez, who had founded a wine industry consulting firm. The boutique segment is booming, she explained, stirring her latte. Small producers with fantastic wines, but limited business expertise. They need someone who understands both the artistry and the commerce. Like a consulting winemaker? I asked. More comprehensive than that. These vineyards need guidance on sustainable practices, production efficiency, distribution strategy, exactly your expertise set. You could help multiple small producers level up rather than tying yourself to one operation. Her suggestions sparked something inside me, the first genuine excitement I'd felt since leaving Russell. Within a month, I had established my own consulting practice, focusing on boutique organic wineries looking to scale their operations sustainably. My first 3 clients came through Alicia's referrals, and word of mouth quickly brought more. 6 months after my departure from Russell Family Vineyards, I had a thriving consultancy with 8 regular clients. For the first time, I was being recognized and compensated purely for my expertise, not as Henry's daughter or Scott's sister. The work was challenging and varied, allowing me to implement innovative approaches that might have taken years to approve at my family's more traditional operation. I was reviewing a new client's production facility designs when my phone rang with a call from Amy, my former assistant at Russell. We'd stayed in occasional contact, though I'd been careful not to press for vineyard gossip. Miranda, she said, her voice tense. I thought you should know. Things aren't going well here. Despite everything, my heart sank. What's happening? Scott changed the fermentation protocol for the Reserve Cabernet without consulting the production team. The latest batch has severe quality issues, and 3 staff members have quit in the past month. I closed my eyes, picturing the familiar tanks and the meticulous process I'd refined over years. Is he following the documentation I left? He says your methods were unnecessarily complicated. He's streamlining everything. The air quotes were audible in her tone. And my father? What does he think? He's backing Scott publicly, but I overheard them arguing in the office yesterday. Something about distribution numbers, missing projections. After hanging up, I sat quietly, absorbing the news. Despite the circumstances of my departure, I took no pleasure in hearing about the vineyard's struggles. Too many good people depended on its success, not to mention the legacy my grandparents had built from nothing. 2 days later, Scott himself called, his voice lacking its usual confident edge. Hey, Cease. How's the city treating you? I'm doing well, I replied neutrally. What can I help you with, Scott? He cleared his throat. So, hypothetically, if a winery needed to adjust the terms of a distribution contract due to production capacity changes, what's the best approach? Translation: they were having trouble meeting Platinum's volume requirements. Hypothetically, I matched his tone. The worst thing you could do is surprise your distributor at the last minute. Transparency is crucial, even with bad news. Right. And would you happen to remember the minimum case requirement in the Platinum contract before penalties kick in? I maintained professional boundaries while providing minimal guidance, directing him to the transition documents where this information was clearly outlined. After hanging up, I wondered how many other critical details were slipping through the cracks under the new leadership. 3 weeks later, the other shoe dropped. Amy called again, this time her voice shaking. Platinum is terminating their contract, she blurted without preamble. $6 million gone. Your father is furious, and Scott is completely overwhelmed. The news hit me harder than expected. I had built that relationship from nothing, nurturing it with consistent quality and reliability. Now it was destroyed, likely from neglect and mismanagement. What happened exactly? I asked. Scott sent the assistant winemaker to an important meeting with Jennifer Thompson instead of going himself. Then they shipped the problematic Cabernet batch without proper quality testing. Jennifer personally called your father after their restaurant started complaining about inconsistent quality. Later that evening, my father's name appeared on my phone screen. After all these months, his first call wasn't a check on my well-being or admit his mistake. It was because he needed something. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Dad. Miranda. His voice was strained, lacking its usual authoritative tone. We need to talk about Platinum distributors. As he began explaining the situation, I gazed out my apartment window at the San Francisco skyline, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and concern for the vineyard that would always, despite everything, feel partly mine. In the weeks following Scott's promotion and my departure, the small issues at Russell Family Vineyards multiplied into serious problems. Amy, my former assistant who had stayed on, became my reluctant source of information, calling every few days with updates that grew increasingly concerning. Scott's reorganized the entire production schedule, she reported during one call. He's compressed the aging time for the reserve wines by 2 months to improve efficiency. I winced, knowing that our reserve Cabernet's distinctive character developed during those final months in oak. How did the production team respond? They tried to explain the quality implications, but he said the market moves too fast to wait. Then he reassigned 2 senior team members who pushed back too strongly. Another call revealed staffing problems spreading beyond production. The tasting room manager quit yesterday. Scott kept changing the event calendar without notice, and she couldn't keep up with the constant revisions. 3 part-time pourers left with her. The most troubling reports concerned the vineyard itself. Manuel, our experienced vineyard manager who had worked the land for over 20 years, was increasingly sidelined. Scott brought in some consultant who's pushing for higher yields through more aggressive pruning, Amy explained. Manuel said it will stress the vines and reduce grape quality, but Scott told him the consultant has modern ideas and Manuel needs to adapt. I paced my apartment, frustrated by my inability to intervene. These weren't just business decisions. They were choices that would affect wine quality for years to come. Vines stressed by overproduction this season would yield lower quality fruit for multiple future harvests. Between these calls from Amy, Scott reached out several times with thinly veiled requests for help. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: casual small talk followed by hypothetical questions about procedures and protocols I had documented extensively before leaving. "Just wondering how you handled the barrel rotation for the single vineyard series," he asked during one call. "The documentation mentions something about specific positioning in the cellar?" "Yes, Scott. The north side of the cellar maintains more consistent temperature during summer months. The single vineyard barrels need that stability. It's all in Section 4 of the production manual." Right. I probably just missed that detail. There's so much to keep track of. His calls grew more frequent as the platinum distributor's situation deteriorated. Jennifer Thompson had been trying to schedule their quarterly review meeting for weeks, but Scott repeatedly postponed. Jennifer called again about rescheduling, he mentioned during another call. "What exactly did you usually cover in these meetings?" I sighed, remembering the detailed transition memo I'd created specifically about distributor relations. Sales performance, upcoming releases, marketing initiatives, production forecasts. Jennifer expects comprehensive updates. She's investing millions in our relationship. Yeah, that makes sense. She seemed annoyed that I didn't have all the numbers ready last time we spoke. Platinum represents 35% of our business, Scott. Those meetings require significant preparation. I know. I've just been pulled in so many directions. The critical mistake came when Scott decided to modify our award-winning Cabernet blend without proper testing. Amy called me in a panic after overhearing the decision. "He's reducing the percentage of grapes from the hillside blocks and substituting more from the valley floor," she explained. "The hillside fruit is more labor-intensive to harvest, and he thinks customers won't notice the difference." But customers did notice, particularly the high-end restaurants and retailers that formed the backbone of Platinum's distribution network. Complaints began trickling in about inconsistent quality and flavor profiles that didn't match previous vintages. Instead of addressing these concerns directly, Scott sent our assistant winemaker to an important meeting with Jennifer. The young man, while talented, lacked the authority to make commitments or the historical knowledge to explain the situation properly. Jennifer, who had built her own reputation on representing consistent, premium wines, was not pleased. She called Scott directly afterward. "That meeting was a waste of my time," she told him bluntly. "I need to speak with someone who can actually address our concerns and make decisions." Scott scheduled a video call but was unprepared for Jennifer's direct questioning about the quality issues and changing production methods. When she asked about the modified blend, he attempted to downplay the changes. "We're just optimizing production," he explained. "The essence of the wine remains the same." "Our restaurant clients disagree," Jennifer countered. "They're reporting significant differences in the profile of your Reserve Cabernet, the very wine that built your reputation with us." The situation reached its breaking point when Scott shipped the problematic Cabernet batch to fulfill Platinum's standing order, despite quality control notes recommending it be downgraded from reserve status. Within days, restaurants were returning cases and contacting Platinum with complaints. Amy called me the evening after Jennifer terminated the contract. "Your father received the official notice today. $6 million, gone just like that." The letter cited inconsistent quality and failure to maintain the partnership standards established at contract signing. I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for the vineyard workers whose livelihoods would be affected, frustration at the preventable nature of the disaster, and yes, a small, human part of me felt vindicated. The expertise my family had dismissed proved essential after all. That evening, my father called, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Miranda," he began without preamble, "Platinum has terminated our distribution contract." "I heard," I replied neutrally. "That's unfortunate. This puts us in a difficult position. Without that distribution channel, we're looking at laying off staff and possibly selling off some acreage to cover operational costs." The thought of selling my grandfather's land made my stomach clench. What happened exactly? My father sighed heavily. Quality issues with the Reserve Cabernet. Scott made some changes to the blend and production process that didn't work out as planned. The understatement was almost laughable. The blend I developed and refined over 7 years? The one that won double gold at the state fair? Yes, that one, he admitted reluctantly. Jennifer Thompson specifically mentioned that the wine no longer matches the profile they contracted for. Jennifer values consistency and trust above all, I said, remembering countless meetings with the distribution executive. Both were apparently broken. Miranda, my father's voice took on a pleading quality I'd never heard before. We need your help. The vineyard, your grandfather's legacy, is at risk. Part of me wanted to remind him that he had dismissed that same legacy when he sidelined me for Scott. Another part remembered the workers who depended on the vineyard for their livelihood. People like Manuel, who had taught me to prune vines as a child. I'll think about it, I said finally. But if I get involved, things will need to change. After hanging up, I stood by my apartment window watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. The situation at Russell Family Vineyards had spiraled exactly as I had feared, and now my family needed me to help clean up the mess. The question was whether I could do so without sacrificing the self-respect that had prompted my departure in the first place. 3 days after my father's call, I drove back to the vineyard for the first time since my departure. The familiar landscape of rolling hills covered in neat rows of vines stirred complicated emotions. This land had shaped my childhood, my education choices, and my career path. Now I was returning not as the dedicated daughter, but as a professional brought in to address a crisis. The tension in the conference room was palpable as I entered. My father sat at the head of the table, his normally commanding posture diminished. My mother's worried eyes darted between family members. Scott slouched in his chair, defensive body language evident before a word was spoken. Thank you for coming, Miranda. My father began, formality replacing the warmth that should exist between father and daughter. I'm here because I care about the vineyard and the people who depend on it, I replied, setting my consultant's portfolio on the table. Let's be clear about the situation we're facing. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the business reality based on the financial documents they'd sent over. Without the Platinum Distributor's contract, Russell Family Vineyards faced a 35% revenue shortfall. Emergency cost-cutting measures could address immediate cash flow concerns, but the lost distribution channels meant unsold inventory would accumulate, creating a compounding problem. Beyond the financial impact, I continued, there's significant damage to our brand reputation. Platinum's restaurant clients are influential tastemakers who talk to other buyers. We need to address both the distribution gap and the quality perception issues simultaneously. My father nodded grimly. What do you recommend? First, we need complete transparency about what happened. Scott, I turned to my brother. I need to understand exactly what changes were made to our production processes and blends. Scott shifted uncomfortably. I was trying to improve efficiency. The reserve Cabernet used grapes from the hillside blocks that cost 60% more to harvest due to the manual labor required. Substituting valley floor fruit improved our margins significantly. Those hillside grapes provide the complexity and structure that define our reserve, I explained, keeping my tone professional rather than accusatory. That's why restaurants and critics responded so positively to it. How was I supposed to know that? Scott's voice rose defensively. Everyone acts like this business is some kind of mystical art form when it's just farming and fermentation. It's both science and art, I corrected him. And the details matter enormously. This isn't a widget factory where you can simply substitute cheaper materials. My mother interjected, tears forming in her eyes. Please, let's not fight. We're facing potential layoffs of people who've been with us for generations. Some of our workers have children in college, mortgages to pay. Her words refocused the conversation on what truly mattered. This wasn't about my wounded pride or Scott's failed leadership. It was about preserving my grandparents' legacy and protecting the livelihoods of our extended vineyard family. I'm willing to help, I said carefully, but I have conditions. I won't come back as an employee reporting to Scott. I'll work as an independent consultant with clear authority over quality control and distribution relationships. My father's jaw tightened at the implicit challenge to his leadership structure. What exactly are you proposing? 3 months, full access to all operations, financial records, and personnel. I'll develop and implement a recovery strategy focused on restoring our quality standards and rebuilding distribution channels. My consulting fee is non-negotiable. I named a figure that reflected my market value, significantly higher than my previous salary. That's outrageous, my father sputtered. That's the market rate for someone with my expertise in crisis management, I countered. You're not hiring your daughter, you're hiring a specialist to save your business. After tense negotiation, we reached an agreement. I would lead the recovery effort with full authority over production and distribution, while Scott would focus on tasting room operations and local events, areas better suited to his creative strengths. My father reluctantly accepted the consulting fee, though he insisted on structuring it partially as a performance bonus tied to restoring distribution channels. The assessment phase revealed the full extent of the damage. Beyond the quality issues with the reserve Cabernet, Scott had implemented numerous problematic changes. Reduced barrel aging time, eliminated cold soaking for red varieties, changed cork suppliers to a cheaper alternative with inconsistent quality, and rushed bottling schedules that didn't allow wines sufficient resting time. The vineyard itself had suffered from the aggressive pruning techniques pushed by Scott's consultant, with vines showing signs of stress that would affect the upcoming harvest. Several experienced staff members had quit, taking their institutional knowledge with them. I called an all-hands meeting on my third day back. Standing before the assembled vineyard workers, cellar staff, and tasting room employees, I spoke candidly. We're facing significant challenges, but Russell Family Vineyards has weathered difficult times before. My grandfather started with 5 acres and a dream. Together, we'll restore what made our wines special and find new paths forward. Manuel, the vineyard manager who had worked alongside my grandfather, spoke up. With respect, MS. Miranda, will these new directions remain in place? Or will they change again when you leave? His question cut to the heart of the trust issue. The staff had witnessed the leadership chaos and needed reassurance about stability. Fair question, I acknowledged. I'm committed to developing systems that will maintain quality regardless of who's in charge. And I'm not making decisions unilaterally. I'll be consulting with the experts in this room who know this land and these wines intimately. Over the following weeks, I worked closely with the remaining production team to document proper protocols and restore quality standards. We conducted blind tastings of wines produced before and after Scott's changes, identifying specific issues to address. I initiated weekly check-ins with department heads to ensure alignment and rebuild morale. Scott initially maintained a defensive posture, but as he observed the positive response to my collaborative approach, his attitude gradually shifted. During a private meeting in the vineyard, walking between rows of Cabernet vines planted by our grandfather, we had our first honest conversation since my return. I never wanted to undermine what you built here, he admitted, running his fingers along a grape cluster. I just wanted to make my own mark, prove I belonged. I understand that, I replied. But leadership isn't about making your mark. It's about serving the business and the people who depend on it. Dad made it sound so straightforward. Take over operations, modernize things, increase profits. I didn't realize how complex every decision would be, how interconnected all the elements are. Wine is a living product, I explained. Every choice affects not just this vintage, but future ones too. These vines remember how they're treated. Scott nodded slowly. I'm better with people than processes. The tasting room guests love the events I've created, and local sales are actually up. But I'm not you, Miranda. I don't have your technical knowledge or attention to detail. His acknowledgement of his limitations represented significant growth. No one expects you to be me, I assured him. But recognizing what you don't know is the first step toward effective leadership. With quality standards being restored internally, I turned my attention to the distribution crisis. I arranged a meeting with Jennifer Thompson from Platinum, not to immediately request reinstatement of our contract, but to personally acknowledge the mistakes made and outline our corrective actions. Jennifer, I said as we sat down for coffee in San Francisco, thank you for meeting with me. I know Russell Vineyards violated your trust, and I want to take full responsibility for that breach, even though I wasn't present when it occurred. Her expression remained professionally neutral. I appreciated your call, Miranda. Platinum built its reputation on quality and consistency. When those standards aren't met, we have to take action, regardless of personal relationships. I completely understand. I'm not here to ask for immediate reinstatement of our contract. I'm here to share the specific steps we're taking to restore our quality standards and ensure this situation never repeats. I outlined the comprehensive quality control systems being implemented, the return to original production methods for our reserve wines, and the installation of a structured approval process for any future changes. Jennifer listened attentively, asking pointed questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of winemaking processes. Your changes sound appropriate, she said finally. But Platinum needs more than promises. We need to see evidence of restored quality. That's fair, I agreed. Would you consider accepting a small test order of our upcoming release? It was produced before the recent issues and has been aging properly. If it meets your standards, perhaps we could discuss a graduated return to distribution. Jennifer considered the proposal. A test order could be workable. But understand, Miranda, we'd be starting from scratch in terms of trust. The relationship would need to be rebuilt step by step. As I drove back to the vineyard, I felt the first real hope since the crisis began. The path forward wouldn't be easy or quick, but it was becoming visible. A way to preserve my grandfather's legacy while establishing new foundations for the future. The meeting with Jennifer Thompson marked a turning point in Russell Family Vineyards' recovery. She agreed to a small test order of 500 cases, a fraction of our previous arrangement, but a critical opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to quality. I personally supervised every aspect of that shipment, from barrel selection to bottling to final quality checks before delivery. 3 weeks later, Jennifer called with cautiously positive feedback. The restaurants report the wine is consistent with the quality they originally came to expect from Russell. If you can maintain this standard, we can discuss increasing orders gradually. This small victory catalyzed bigger changes within our family dynamics. My father, who had initially viewed my return as a temporary necessity, began seeking my input on long-term strategic decisions. During one evening meeting in his office, he surprised me with an unusual admission. I was wrong, Miranda, he said, staring down at a spreadsheet rather than meeting my eyes. About a lot of things. Your brother wasn't ready for the role I gave him. The acknowledgement, while still avoiding the gender bias underlying his original decision, represented significant growth. It wasn't fair to Scott either, I pointed out. Setting someone up for a position they don't have the experience to handle isn't doing them any favors. My father nodded slowly. I suppose I was holding on to outdated ideas about succession. Your grandfather passed the vineyard to me, and I always assumed I'd pass it to my son. I never stopped to question whether that tradition still made sense. The wine industry has changed since Grandpa's day, I said. The operations are more complex, the market more competitive. Leadership decisions need to be based on capability, not convention. These conversations led to a restructuring proposal that I presented to the family the following week. Rather than a traditional hierarchy with a single head of operations, I suggested a partnership model with clearly defined areas of responsibility based on our respective strengths. Scott has genuine talent for customer experience and community relations, I explained, displaying charts showing the increased tasting room revenue under his management. I propose he leads our direct-to-consumer business, including the tasting room, events, and wine club. Scott, who had been quietly attentive during my presentation, straightened in his chair. I'd like that. It plays to my strengths, while still giving me a leadership role. Meanwhile, I continued, I would oversee production, quality control, and distribution relationships, areas aligned with my technical expertise and industry connections. My mother, who had remained largely silent during the recovery process, spoke up. And where does your father fit in this new structure? As chairman and CEO, I explained. Focusing on strategic vision, land acquisition opportunities, and industry relations, leveraging his decades of experience and connections while delegating daily operations. My father considered the proposal, his expression thoughtful. And ownership? What are you suggesting there? This was the critical question. One that addressed not just operational roles, but long-term equity in the family business. I believe ownership should reflect contribution and commitment, I replied carefully. I'm proposing that Scott and I each receive 30% equity stakes now, with the remaining 40% staying with you and Mom. As you move toward retirement, we can discuss further transition. The equity discussions sparked intense negotiation over several days. My father initially balked at relinquishing controlling interest, while my mother worried about fairness between siblings. Scott, to his credit, recognized the greater value I had created for the business. Miranda deserves at least equal ownership to me, he stated during one particularly tense discussion. Probably more, given her track record. I'm fine with her having a larger stake. His support shifted the conversation. Eventually, we reached an agreement. I would receive 35% ownership, Scott 25%, and my parents would retain 40% with a structured transition plan for the future. With our new organizational structure in place, we turned our full attention to rebuilding our distribution network. Jennifer gradually increased Platinum's orders as we consistently demonstrated renewed quality commitment. 6 months after the crisis, we had regained approximately 60% of our previous distribution volume, a significant achievement, though full recovery would take longer. Just as important as the business recovery was the healing within our family. Scott and I developed a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. During a rare, quiet moment in the vineyard, watching the sunset over the hills our grandfather had chosen decades ago, Scott expressed what seemed like genuine appreciation. You know, I'm actually happier in this role than I was trying to run everything, he admitted. I get to focus on the parts one enjoy and do well, without pretending to understand the technical stuff that makes my eyes glaze over. I laughed. And I don't have to organize entertaining events or charm wine club members, which honestly terrifies me more than any production crisis. We make a good team when we're not being forced into the wrong roles, he observed. The most profound change, perhaps, came in my relationship with my father. During the harvest that marked 1 year since the crisis, he joined me for early morning grape sampling, something we hadn't done together since I was in college. Your grandfather would be proud of what you've built here, he said as we walked between the rows, testing sugar levels in the pre-dawn light. He always said you had the best palate in the family. I wish he could see where we are now, I replied. Not just the vineyard, but our family, working together as equals. My father nodded, uncharacteristically reflective. I almost lost all of this because I couldn't see past my own assumptions. The vineyard, yes, but more importantly, my relationship with you. The recovery wasn't without ongoing challenges. Rebuilding our reputation in the industry took consistent effort and time. Some of the vineyard blocks damaged by aggressive pruning required years to return to optimal production. We had to work harder than ever to distinguish ourselves in an increasingly competitive market. But these challenges were met by a unified family with complementary strengths and a shared commitment to quality. 2 years after the crisis, Russell Family Vineyards was on solid financial footing again, with distribution restored and even expanded into new markets Scott had identified through his customer relationship building. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about self-advocacy and professional worth. By walking away from an unfair situation, I had ultimately created the leverage needed to establish proper recognition. By refusing to accept a role beneath my capabilities, I forced a necessary reassessment of old assumptions. Most importantly, I learned that true leadership isn't about titles or hierarchy. It's about creating systems where everyone's strengths are recognized and utilized appropriately. Our vineyard now thrived not because of rigid tradition, but because we had built something more sustainable, a business structure that valued expertise over convention, results over relationships, and merit over inheritance. As we celebrated the 3rd successful harvest under our new structure, surrounded by the vineyard team and their families, I reflected on the journey from crisis to renewal. The rows of vines stretching to the horizon represented not just my grandfather's legacy, but our family's evolution, our ability to grow, adapt, and ultimately produce something better together than we ever could apart. Have you ever had to walk away from something you loved to make others recognize your true value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this journey of standing up for your worth, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need encouragement to know their value isn't determined by someone else's perception. Thank you for joining me for this deeply personal story. And remember, sometimes the most difficult choices lead to the most beautiful destinations.